If you want to beat your league in fantasy basketball this week, stop scrolling. This is the video that you need. I've already called out guys like Ryan Kalkbrenner, Cedric Coward, Keyshawn George, and Kevin Huerter. All were under 5% rostered before they blew up. Today, I'll show you the next group of players who can win you this week and maybe even change your entire season. And welcome back to The Corner, your #1 destination for everything fantasy basketball related. If you've been finding these videos helpful, please stop waiting, subscribe to the channel right now, and turn on notifications so you never miss a pickup, a ranking, or trade target that can win you your entire league. Every week matters, every edge counts, so lock in and stay ahead of your league. First up, we've got the old vet himself, Mike Conley. At the start of the season, fantasy managers completely wrote him off, me included. He was averaging just about 12 minutes a game and actually was putting up negative fantasy points in those games. Absolute ghost numbers. But fast forward to now, and things have changed big time. With Anthony Edwards down sideline, Conley has been called into a bigger role, and he's reminding everyone that he's still got plenty left in the tank. Over his last few games, he's jumped all the way up to 33 fantasy points per game. That's a massive swing for a guy who was barely being played last week. If you're looking for some temporary scoring punch this week, look no further. As long as Edwards is on the bench with a hamstring injury, Conley should be locked in for around 28 minutes a night, and he's not just scoring with those minutes. He's contributing across the board with assists, steals, and the steady and veteran efficiency that you look for. And the best part about all of this is that he's only rostered in 2% of ESPN leagues. That means he's sitting on the waiver wire in almost every single league out there, just waiting to be added right now. Minnesota also plays 4 games this week, which makes Conley one of the best short-term adds you can make, especially if you're trying to squeeze out those extra points before the weekend. So if you got a spot open on your roster, I recommend go grab Mike Conley now before your league makes notice what's happening. He's definitely not a long-term hold at all, but for this week, he's the perfect plug-and-play veteran who can help you steal a win and keep the momentum rolling on your roster. Next up, we've got a player that I mentioned earlier in the season, but now it's time to take him seriously, and that is Ryan Dunn. When I first brought up Ryan Dunn, I was overly cautious. His minutes were a little inconsistent, his production was hit or miss, and honestly, the Phoenix Suns didn't look like a team that was worth investing in. But fast forward to week 3, and Dunn has quietly become one of the most steady contributors on that roster. No matter who's in the lineup, he's putting up consistent points. Over the past few games, we've seen his minutes steadily climb, and he's starting to show the kind of across-the-board value that deep league managers dream about. He's giving you points, rebounds, and a few assists per game, and some sneaky defensive stats like steals and blocks. Nothing flashy, but consistent fantasy production that adds up over a full week. Now, if you're in a deeper league, this is a player that should absolutely be rostered. But even if you're in a shallow format and need a reliable rotational piece, Dunn can easily fill that role. He might not be an elite rebounder on paper, but when you look at the numbers, 13% total rebound rate and 18% on the defensive glass, that's enough to make a difference in your box score every single night. But the best part is he's only rostered in 4% of leagues right now. That means he's flying completely under the radar, but that won't last long if his minutes start to creep back up and his production also starts to creep up with those minutes as well. So if you're trying to add a player who won't tank your team's efficiency and can quietly stack stats across all categories the whole week, Ryan Dunn is your guy. He's low risk, high consistency, and that's exactly what you want from a waiver wire pickup heading into week 3. Next up on the list, we have probably one of the most underappreciated veterans in the whole NBA. And this is going to be Josh Okogie. The 6-year vet is now on his 4th NBA team, and somehow he still manages to be one of the most reliable contributors wherever he goes. He didn't even start on opening night, which had a lot of fantasy managers thinking he was just another bench flyer for the Rockets. But since then, Okogie has found his rhythm and earned himself a starting role, and has quietly become one of the most consistent fantasy performers on the Houston Rockets. Now let's be honest, Okogie is not the type of pickup that's going to blow your league up overnight. He's not flashy, he's not dropping 40 fantasy points out of nowhere, but what he gives you is something that every single winning fantasy team needs, and that is dependability. He produces solid mistake-free basketball night after night, and when you're fighting for every category or every point, that reliability matters. His role in Houston is definitely capped, so don't expect huge points or huge games. He's playing behind Amon Thompson, Kevin Durant, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen Sengun, so you're not going to get massive usage out of him. What makes him viable is how efficient he is when he does get those touches. Right now, Josh Okogie is posting an insane 86% true shooting percentage, which is absolutely elite. That means when he shoots, it's basically guaranteed points. He's taking high quality shots, not forcing bad looks, and that's exactly the kind of player that you can trust for consistent production. Across his last few games, he's averaging around 10 points per game, and his fantasy floor has been locked at 18 points per night. That's not game breaking, but it's dependable, and that's exactly what we're looking for. And in a long fantasy season, you'll take that kind of stability every single time. There's a minimal risk involved with adding Okogie to your roster. He's not going to tank your percentages or cost you turnovers, and while his ceiling isn't massive, his role is clearly defined in Houston. If there's an injury to anyone in that Rockets starting core, he becomes even more valuable, a plug-and-play option who can give you instant scoring and efficiency. And the best part is that he's sitting there in 99% of ESPN leagues right now. No one is thinking about Josh Okogie. No one's fighting for him, and no one's talking about him. And that's exactly why you should be paying attention to what I'm saying right now. If you find yourself short on points or need a safe flyer to stabilize your lineup for a few games, do not overthink it. Josh Okogie is that guy for you. Sometimes it's not about the highlight plays, it's about the steady vets who keep you afloat while everyone else is chasing the hype players. Next up on this list, we've got a player who always seems to split fantasy managers right down the middle, and that is going to be Isaiah Stewart. He's one of the more polarizing players in the league. Some see him as a breakout waiting to happen. Others think he's just a depth piece. But one thing that's hard to argue is that Stewart is still one of the most talented big men in the NBA when he's given the opportunity. The problem, of course, has been Jalen Duren in Detroit. Duren's rise has eaten into Stewart's minutes and touches, which has made him a frustrating player to roster for the long term. But this week, Stewart is exactly the kind of calculated risk that could play off big. The Pistons play 4 games this week, and here's the key part. Every single matchup is against a team with a weak interior defense. That means there's more opportunities for rebounds, putbacks, and easy buckets inside. Even if he's not the number one option on the team, those kind of matchups can make role players like Stewart quietly rack up 25 to 30 fantasy points on efficiency alone. He definitely does not have the same ceiling as Duren or Cunningham on this team, and he's not going to suddenly become a top 50 guy. But sometimes fantasy basketball comes down to schedule, and Stewart's schedule this week is very soft. If you got a free roster spot or need help in rebounds, field goal percentage, or blocks, Isaiah Stewart is a pickup that you can absolutely roll the dice on. It's low risk, solid matchup based on upside, and he's more than capable of producing when given the minutes. This is the perfect week to test him out. Now we have my favorite play of the week. There's always that one player every single week who just kind of comes out of nowhere and makes a name for himself. And this week, that player is going to be Quentin Jackson of the Indiana Pacers. Jackson is on a 2-way contract, but you wouldn't know it how he's been playing the last 2 games. With all the injuries that are hitting the Pacers, this roster has opened the door for a lot of under the radar guys to step up. And Jackson has absolutely taken advantage of his shot. With Andrew Nembhard still out without a clear timetable with a shoulder injury, these next few games are going to be a huge opportunity for him to prove that he belongs in the NBA. And for fantasy managers, that means there's real short-term upside to this player. In the 2 games that Jackson started last week, he has been on absolute fire. He's averaging nearly 50 fantasy points per game right now. And that's not a mistake. It's 50 per game at this moment. When you dig into the numbers, it's not just empty scoring either. He's putting up stats across the board. His true shooting percentage sits at 68% right now, which is beyond elite, especially for a high volume guard who's getting his first real NBA minutes. Now let's be clear, this is a very, very high risk play, but if it pans out, this is a very high reward play. Because he's on a 2-way contract, there's no guarantee of stability for his job. If the Pacers get healthy or if he does cool off, the floor can drop out very fast. But if he keeps his momentum going, he could generally win you this week and potentially be a long-term play on your roster. The Pacers play 4 games this week, and right now there's little competition at the guard spot. Jackson is going to get minutes. That's not a question. And with those minutes becomes more opportunities, especially on a team that plays at one of the fastest paces in the NBA. If you're sitting at 1-1 or 0-2 and you need a spark to turn your season around, Quentin Jackson is the kind of player that you take the gamble on. Yes, it is risky, but sometimes fantasy basketball is about betting on the hot hand, and right now there's nobody who is hotter than this guy. And the last on the list we have is going to be Gary Trent Jr., who's quietly become one of the most stable fantasy options in the Milwaukee Bucks backcourt this year. This backcourt has been in complete chaos and fluctuation since the very first game of the season, and that is thanks to the Kevin Porter injury. Between the injury to Kevin Porter Jr. and the constant rotation adjustments, it's been tough to figure out who's worth trusting in Milwaukee, but through all that inconsistency, Gary Trent Jr. has been one of the guys who's actually held steady. Now, with Ryan Rollins emerging and Cole Anthony shifting back to a backup role, Trent has carved out a reliable high-minute spot in this lineup. He's not going to give you the crazy 50-point fantasy explosions like some of the riskier pickups we talked about in this video, but that's the point. Trent gives you stability, scoring, and volume on a team that desperately needs both right now. With Kevin Porter Jr. now being sidelined for the next month due to an injury he sustained at practice, the Bucks backcourt is officially the Ryan Rollins and Gary Trent show right now. Expect Trent to hover around 30 minutes per game, knocking down threes and spacing the floor, and giving you that safe 20 to 25 fantasy points a night that you can count on. If you're chasing upside, there are flashier options out there, but if you just need a solid plug-and-play guard who won't tank your efficiency, Gary Trent Jr. is that guy. He's one of the safest, most reliable ways to get a piece of Milwaukee's offense right now, and over a 4-game week, that's the kind of consistency that quietly wins matchups. So that is going to wrap up my list of 6 sleeper players that you should be targeting this week. Some of these guys might just be short-term streamers, but a few of them have the potential to become permanent pieces on your roster. So do not wait to make the move. If you're trying to stay ahead of your league, you should keep the momentum going and click on the playlist that is on your screen right now. It's loaded with my top sleepers, waiver pickups, and buy low trade targets from every week of the season. Each video builds on the last, so if you want to keep stacking wins, the playlist is exactly where you need to go next. Thanks for stopping by the corner, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.